When the stagecoach left her behind, Alara Vance knew she had reached the end of the line. With only 17 cents to her name and a heart heavy with loss, she was a lone widow in a town that saw her as nothing but a disgrace. The biting wind was cold, but the stares of the townsfolk were colder. As night began to fall, every door was closed to her, and hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. But then a feared, reclusive cowboy with a scarred face made an offer that could either be her salvation or her final ruin. Before we follow Alara into the unknown, if you believe in second chances, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Frontier Rescue Stories so you never miss a tale of courage from the Wild West. And let me know in the comments from which part of the world you're watching this story unfold. Now stay with us, because what begins as a simple act of mercy soon becomes a fight for love, honor, and a future neither of them ever dared to imagine. The November wind hit Alara Vance's face like a slap the moment she stepped down from the stagecoach. She clutched her worn carpet bag to her chest, a pathetic treasure chest holding 3 dresses, a broken pocket watch that had belonged to her husband Liam, and the last 17 cents to her name. The cold sliced right through her traveling coat, the good wool one she'd bought back when Liam was still alive, back when the world still made sense. She watched the driver haul down the last of the luggage, his movements final and indifferent. "That's everything, ma'am," he grunted, not even looking at her. "Wait." Alara's voice was a whisper against the wind. "I'm supposed to continue on to Haven's Peak. My ticket." Axles cracked. The driver spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "We're done for today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after, depends on the blacksmith. But I don't have—" She stopped herself. Pride, sharp and painful, clamped down on the words. "I don't have money for a hotel." Pride was about all she had left, and she wasn't ready to surrender it. Not yet. The driver finally looked at her, and his eyes held a particular brand of apathy Alara had come to know well in the 6 months since Liam died. It was the look that said, "Your problems are not my problems. You're on your own now." He climbed back onto his seat. "There's a hotel on Main Street, Mrs. Albright's boarding house if you're looking for something cheaper." The stagecoach pulled away, leaving Alara utterly alone in the middle of Stone Creek with her carpet bag, her 17 cents, and the sinking certainty that she had made a terrible, terrible mistake. The town was a graveyard of dreams, a single main street lined with weathered buildings, their paint peeling in the constant wind. A general store, a saloon, and at the far end, a white church steeple rose against the gray sky like a finger, pointing toward a heaven that seemed to have forgotten all about her. She had traded one impossible situation for another. She was the kind of woman whose husband had died in a mining accident, leaving nothing but debts. The kind of woman whose in-laws blamed her for their son's death, making it clear she wasn't welcome anywhere near the memories of the man she'd loved. The kind of woman who'd clung to a 3-year-old letter from her cousin Clara in Haven's Peak, a letter that promised there would always be a place for family, a promise that now felt as substantial as smoke. A woman emerged from the general store, saw Alara standing there, and quickly averted her eyes. Alara recognized that look too. It was the look that said, "Respectable women don't travel alone." It asked without words, what kind of woman shows up in a strange town with no husband, no family, no connections? Alara picked up her bag and started walking. Her feet carried her past the saloon, where men's laughter spilled out into the cold air, past the feed store, where a group of ranch hands stopped their conversation to watch her pass. "Well now," one of them said, loud enough to carry. "Looks like someone got left behind." Laughter followed her down the street like a pack of dogs. The boarding house sat at the end of a side street, a 2-story building with a hand-painted sign that read, "Mrs. Albright's rooms, respectable ladies only." Alara gathered her courage and knocked. The woman who answered was thin and sharp-featured, her gray hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her eyes inventoried Alara from head to toe, making calculations. "Good afternoon," Alara said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm looking for a room, just for a night or two." "We require a week's payment in advance," Mrs. Albright said, her voice as crisp as the cold air. $2, cash only." $2 might as well have been 200. I'm afraid I don't. Have $2, Alara admitted, the words feeling like pulling teeth. The stagecoach broke down unexpectedly and I wasn't prepared for... I'm sorry, but I can't help you, Mrs. Albright said, already closing the door. Good day. The door clicked shut. Alara stood on the porch, a hard, bitter lump rising in her throat. She walked back toward Main Street as the afternoon light began to fade, her mind racing through desperate possibilities. Sleep in the church? They'd call the sheriff. Sleep in an alley? The thought made her stomach turn. But what choice did she have? She was so lost in her spiraling thoughts that she almost walked straight into the man coming out of the general store. He stopped short, steadying a crate of supplies. Alara stumbled back, apologizing. Excuse me, I wasn't... She looked up, and the words died in her throat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, beneath a work-worn coat, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of creek water. But it was the scar that drew her attention. A thick, jagged line that ran from his left ear down across his jaw, pulling one corner of his mouth into a permanent slight twist. The kind of scar that spoke of violence, of a story that probably didn't have a happy ending. He looked at her, and in his eyes Alara saw something she hadn't seen in any other face in Stone Creek. He actually saw her, not as a nuisance or a scandal, but as a person in trouble. You're the woman from the stagecoach, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Alara lifted her chin. The one who got left behind. He nodded slowly. Where are you staying? I'm working on that. Something flickered across his face, understanding. The boarding house turn you away? There was no point in lying. I don't have enough money. He was quiet for a moment, studying her. Then he nodded as if coming to a decision. Ma'am, no one sleeps out in this weather. He gestured with his head toward a wagon hitched nearby. Come on. I've got a cabin about 8 miles out. Extra blankets, warm fire. You can stay until the stagecoach is fixed. He said it matter-of-factly, as if offering shelter to strange women was something he did every day. Name's Caleb Thorne. Every instinct screamed that this was improper, dangerous, scandalous. A woman didn't go off alone with a strange man. But what reputation did she have left to protect? And what was the alternative? Freeze to death in an alley or accept help from a scarred stranger with kind eyes? Why? The question came out before she could stop it. Why would you help me? Caleb Thorne looked at her, and something ancient and sad flickered in his expression. Because somebody should have helped you already, and nobody did. He turned toward the wagon. It's up to you, ma'am, but night's coming and the temperature's dropping fast. Alara looked back down Main Street, at the closed doors and drawn curtains, at the people who had looked right through her. Then she picked up her carpet bag and followed Caleb Thorne to his wagon. Alara settled onto the wooden bench of the wagon, Caleb's calloused hand firm as he helped her up. He climbed up beside her, took the reins, and with a soft click of his tongue, the horses started forward. Stone Creek fell away behind them as they headed out onto the open prairie. The land stretched flat and endless in all directions, brown grass bending in the wind under a huge gray sky. Alara had grown up where the hills rolled gentle and the trees grew thick, where the world felt contained and knowable. This prairie openness unsettled her, made her feel small and exposed. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clip-clop of hooves. Alara tried not to stare at the man beside her, but she couldn't help stealing glances. He sat easy in the seat, his scarred face turned toward the horizon. There was something solid about him, as if the wind that shook the wagon couldn't move him an inch. You headed to Havens Peak? Caleb asked eventually, his voice low and rough, as if he didn't use it much. Yes, I have family there. A cousin? Long way from the east? Alara glanced at him sharply. How did you know? Your accent. The unscarred side of his mouth quirked up slightly. Also, you mentioned it to the stagecoach driver. Oh, Alara felt foolish. Yes, a long way. But there wasn't anything left for me back home after my husband passed. I'm sorry. He said it like he meant it, like the words carried actual weight. Thank you. Alara pulled her coat tighter. What about you, Mr. Thorne? Have you lived out here long? 5 years. Came out from the east after... He stopped, his jaw tightening. After things changed. Bought the land, built the cabin. Run cattle, some horses. It's a living. There was clearly more to the story, but Alara didn't push. She understood about things left unsaid. They rode on as the sun sank lower, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber. The beauty of it caught her by surprise. She'd spent so much time afraid, so much time grieving and worrying, that she'd forgotten to notice things like sunsets. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Caleb glanced at her, then back at the horizon. "It grows on you." Most people hate it at first. Too empty, too quiet. But after a while, he trailed off, but Alara thought she understood. After a while, the emptiness became a kind of freedom. The quiet became peace. The cabin appeared as the last light was fading. A low structure of rough-hewn logs with a stone chimney nestled near a line of cottonwood trees. "It's not much," Caleb said, pulling the wagon to a stop. "But it's warm and dry." "It's perfect," Alara said, and meant it. After a day of rejection, the simple cabin looked like salvation. The interior was dim, smelling of wood smoke and coffee. Caleb lit a kerosene lamp, revealing a single large room. It was sparse, but not uncomfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A rough-hewn table with 2 chairs sat near a simple kitchen area. A bed stood against the far wall, covered with a patchwork quilt. And that was all. No decorations, no personal touches. It was the loneliest room Alara had ever seen. "I know it's not what you're used to," Caleb said, lighting a fire in the hearth. "But like I said, it's warm." "Mr. Thorne, I can't take your bed," Alara said quickly. "I can sleep on the floor." "You'll sleep by the fire," Caleb cut her off, not unkindly. He spread a worn wool blanket on the floor near the hearth, adding another rolled blanket for a pillow. "Not fancy, but you won't freeze. I need to tend the animals. Help yourself to anything you need." He was halfway to the door before Alara found her voice. "Mr. Thorne." "Caleb, I don't know how to thank you." He paused in the doorway, silhouetted against the darkening sky. "No need to thank me. Like I said, somebody should have helped you. I'm just glad I could." Then he was gone, and Alara stood alone in the warm cabin with tears suddenly burning in her eyes. She'd been holding herself together all day, but now, in this moment of unexpected kindness from a scarred stranger, something inside her cracked. She sank down onto the blanket by the fire and let herself cry, ugly, gasping sobs of someone who'd been holding on too tight for too long. She cried for Liam, for the life they'd planned, for the last 6 months of struggle, and from sheer relief that for tonight at least, she was safe. By the time Caleb returned, she'd pulled herself together. If he noticed her red eyes, he didn't mention it. They moved around each other carefully in the small space, sharing coffee. The silence stretched between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. "The scar on your face?" Alara asked, then immediately regretted how intrusive it sounded. But Caleb just took a sip of his coffee. "Horse threw me. 5 years back. Landed face first on a rock. My neighbor, old man, stitched me up best he could. Did a hell of a job considering he usually worked on cattle." He smiled slightly, a self-deprecating twist of his mouth. "It wasn't pretty before, but it's definitely not winning any beauty contests now. I think it makes you look distinguished," Alara said, then felt her cheeks heat. Caleb laughed, a low, rusty sound. "That's a kind way of putting it. Most folks find it off-putting. Kids in town run away when they see me coming." "Then the kids in town are idiots." The words came out sharper than Alara intended. "You saved my life tonight, Mr. Thorne. I don't care what your face looks like." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise maybe, or gratitude. "It's Caleb," he said quietly. "You can call me Caleb. Then you should call me Alara." "Alara," he tried out the name. "That's a good name, strong." As the fire burned down, they carefully traded pieces of their stories. Alara learned he'd been married once, that his wife Rebecca had died of a fever, that he'd come west because he couldn't stand to stay in the house they'd built together. In return, she told him about Liam, about the mining accident, about her in-laws who blamed her. She told him about her cousin's letter, the desperate gamble that had brought her here. As she settled onto the blanket by the fire, she could hear Caleb's slow, steady breathing across the room. For the first time in months, she didn't feel completely alone. A thought occurred to her. What if the stagecoach took longer to fix? The thought should have worried her. But instead, as the fire crackled and the wind whispered outside, Alara felt something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. She felt safe, and for now that was enough. 3 days passed and the stagecoach remained broken. Alara found herself settling into the rhythm of life at the cabin with a surprising ease. She insisted on helping with the chores, finding a deep satisfaction in the physical work. Her hands, soft from months of idleness, blistered and then hardened. She brought a woman's touch to the lonely cabin, sweeping the floors, organizing the chaotic pantry, and baking bread. On the 4th morning, Caleb came in from the barn and stopped just inside the door, watching her knead dough. "What?" she asked, not looking up. "Nothing. It's just," he paused. "It's been a long time since there was bread baking in this cabin." The smell. I'd forgotten what it was like. Alara understood what he wasn't saying. He was remembering his wife. "Rebecca used to bake?" she asked gently. Caleb nodded. "Every Sunday." Said it made the place feel like a real home instead of just a shelter. The comfortable silence that followed was a testament to how much had changed between them. "I should ride into town today," he said after a while. "Check on the stagecoach." "I'll come with you," Alara said. A flicker of concern crossed Caleb's face. "Alara, people talk. A woman staying out here with me. They're going to have ugly opinions about it." Alara had been trying not to think about it, but she wasn't naive. She knew exactly what conclusions people would draw. A week ago, the thought would have horrified her. But something had shifted. Reputation couldn't keep you warm at night. "I'd rather be alive and gossiped about than dead and respectable," she said finally. "Let them think what they want." "I know the truth. You know the truth. That's enough." Caleb studied her for a long moment, and she saw respect in his eyes. "You're tougher than you look, Alara Vance." "I've had to be. In town." The blacksmith confirmed the stagecoach needed another week for repairs, his eyes full of leering insinuation about Alara's other accommodations. Caleb's low, dangerous voice quickly shut him up. The real confrontation, however, happened in the general store. The store owner's wife treated them with icy disapproval. As she was wrapping their purchases, 2 women entered, the mayor's wife, Mrs. Davenport, and her daughter. "Well," Mrs. Davenport said, her voice carrying through the small store. "Caleb Thorne, I heard you'd taken in a stray, but I had to see it to believe it." Her eyes raked over Alara with undisguised contempt. It must be such a comfort having female company after all this time alone. Though I do wonder what dear Rebecca would think of the arrangement. The words were meant to wound, and they did. Alara saw Caleb flinch, saw pain flash across his face at the mention of his dead wife. Something fierce and protective rose up in her chest. "Mrs. Davenport, is it?" Alara stepped forward, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "How kind of you to be concerned about Mr. Thorne's welfare. I'm sure it must be difficult for you, having nothing better to do than speculate about other people's private affairs. Perhaps you should find a hobby. Needlework, perhaps? Though charity does require a generous heart, so maybe needlework would be more suitable." A shocked silence fell over the store. Mrs. Davenport's face turned an interesting shade of purple. "How dare you?" she sputtered, before her daughter managed to lead her away, but not before she shot Alara a look of pure venom. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "Both of you." The ride home was charged with a new energy. "You shouldn't have done that," Caleb said, his eyes on the road. "Defended me like that. Mrs. Davenport doesn't forgive insults. You've made things harder for yourself for no good reason." "It wasn't for no reason," Alara said, twisting her hands in her lap. "She was cruel to you, Caleb. She used your wife's memory to hurt you. And I couldn't just stand there and let it happen. Why not? Everyone else does. Because you're not everyone else to me." The words came out raw and honest. "You saved me. You showed me kindness when no one else would. You made me feel human again when I was starting to forget what that felt like. So, no, I couldn't just stand there and let that horrible woman hurt you." Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop right there in the middle of the empty road. He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "You're the damnest woman I've ever met," he said softly. "I'll take that as a compliment. It is one." He reached out slowly and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were rough, but his touch was gentle. "Thank you, Alara, for seeing me as something other than the scarred hermit everyone else sees." "I see a good man," Alara said quietly. "That's all I've ever seen." Something profound and terrifying and wonderful passed between them. Alara felt it settle in her chest like a living thing, and she knew with sudden certainty that she was in trouble. The kind of trouble that had nothing to do with broken stagecoaches and small-town gossip. and everything to do with the way her heart beat faster when Caleb was near. The morning of the 7th day dawned clear and cold. Alara was frying eggs when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching fast, too fast. She moved to the window just as Caleb emerged from the barn, his body going tense. The man who dismounted was tall and well-dressed, his face twisted with fury. Alara's blood turned to ice. It was Daniel Vance, her late husband's older brother. She met him on the porch. "Daniel," she said, her voice steady.
"What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?"
His voice was sharp with disbelief. "I've been searching for you for weeks. And when I finally find you, it's living in sin with some—" He looked past her at Caleb with undisguised contempt. "Some scarred hermit in the middle of nowhere." "I am not living in sin," Alara said coldly. "Mr. Thorne offered me shelter." "You need to understand something, Thorne," Daniel said, turning his disdain on Caleb. "Alara is my brother's widow, which makes her my responsibility." "I'm not leaving her here. I'm not your responsibility," Alara snapped. "Not since your mother threw me out and told me I wasn't welcome at Liam's funeral. You all blame me for his death. Don't you dare stand there now and pretend you're concerned for my welfare. I'm here because Liam would want me to make sure you were all right," Daniel said, his voice softening slightly. Then he delivered the final crushing blow. "And about your plan to go to Havens Peak, I have some bad news. Your cousin Clara isn't there anymore. She moved to San Francisco 2 years ago. There's nothing for you in Havens Peak, Alara." The words hit Alara like a punch. Her last hope, the one shred of a plan she'd been clinging to, was gone. She swayed, and Caleb's hand came to her elbow, steadying her. "Now, Alara, come with me," Daniel pressed. "Let me help you. You have no money, no prospects. What exactly are you going to figure out? How long can you stay here playing house with Thorne before the whole territory knows you for what you are?" "That's enough," Caleb said, his voice hard as iron. "You need to leave, now." "I'm not leaving without her," Daniel said stubbornly. "No." Alara stepped closer to Caleb, feeling his solid presence at her back. "Mr. Thorne has shown me more kindness in a week than your family showed me in 2 years of marriage." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Daniel's face flushed with anger. "Fine, stay here then. Ruin yourself completely. But don't come crying to me when he gets tired of you and throws you out. Men like him don't keep women around out of the goodness of their hearts. When he's had his fill, you'll find yourself right back where you started, only with a reputation so tattered that no decent man will ever—" He didn't finish the sentence. Caleb moved so fast Alara barely saw it. His fist connected with Daniel's jaw with a sickening crack. Daniel went down hard in the dirt. "I told you to watch your tongue," Caleb said, standing over him, his hands shaking with rage. "Now get on your horse and ride out of here before I forget I'm trying to be civilized." Daniel struggled to his feet, spitting blood. "This isn't over," he snarled, stalking back to his horse. "You're making a mistake, Alara, a mistake you'll pay for." He rode off at a gallop. Inside, Alara guided Caleb to the table and began cleaning his split, bleeding knuckles. "He said things," Caleb growled, "that no man should say about any woman, let alone you. And now he's going to make trouble for both of us. Let him try." Caleb met her eyes, his gaze fierce and protective. "Why?" Alara whispered. "Why do you care so much about what happens to me? You really don't know?" He reached up with his good hand and cupped her cheek. "Because in the week since you walked into my life, you've reminded me what it feels like to be alive. Because you see me, really see me, and you're not afraid. Because—" He took a breath. "Because I'm falling in love with you, Alara, and I know that's crazy and impossible and terrible timing, but it's true." Tears were burning in Alara's eyes. "Caleb, You don't have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know you have a life to build that doesn't include a scarred rancher in the middle of nowhere. But I needed you to know." Alara looked at this man who had saved her, protected her, and defended her honor with his fists. She looked at the cabin that had become a home. "I love you too," she whispered. "God help me, I love you too. But I can't stay here. Not like this. Not unmarried, giving Mrs. Davenport and Daniel exactly what they want to think about us." She took his hands in hers. "If I stay, Caleb, if we do this, we do it right. We do it in a way that no one can question." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You mean—" "I mean that if you want me to stay, you need to marry me. Properly. In front of God and the whole damn town." A slow, wondering smile spread across his face. "Alara Vance, are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm telling you the conditions for staying." He leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers, cutting off her words. It was her first kiss since Liam, and it was desperate and tender and full of promise all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Caleb was grinning. "Is that a yes?" Ilara asked. "That's a hell yes," Caleb said. The next day was Sunday. Ilara and Caleb rode into Stone Creek, dressed in their best clothes, a silent, resolute couple against the world. The church was already filling up, and they felt the whispers and stares follow them as they found seats near the back. When the service ended, they approached the minister, Reverend Michael, an older man with kind eyes. "We'd like to be married," Caleb said directly. "Today, if possible." The Reverend studied them for a long moment, and Ilara held her breath. But then he smiled. "I've been a minister for 30 years, he said quietly. "And in that time, I've learned to recognize genuine feeling when I see it. You two, there's something real here." The ceremony was simple and quick, witnessed only by the Reverend and the couple from the general store. When Caleb slipped Rebecca's simple gold wedding band onto Ilara's finger, his hands were shaking. When Reverend Michael pronounced them husband and wife and Caleb kissed her there in front of the altar, Ilara felt something click into place, like a piece of her soul that had been missing had finally found its way home. They made it exactly 3 steps out of the church before Mrs. Davenport's voice rang out across the churchyard. "Well, well, if it isn't the happy couple." She was standing with a group of other town matrons. Behind them, Ilara's heart sank to see Daniel Vance. "My dear Mr. Thorne," Mrs. Davenport mocked, "surely you don't expect anyone to believe this farce. You two have been living in sin, and now you rush to the altar in some pathetic attempt to legitimize it. It's shameful." "What's shameful?" Ilara's voice carried clear and strong, "is the way you've been spreading lies about us. What's shameful, Mrs. Davenport, is you." A shocked silence fell over the crowd. "She's my wife," Caleb said, his voice calm but unyielding. "Properly married in the sight of God. If you've got a problem with that, you can take it up with Reverend Michael." "Mayor," Daniel stepped forward, "I'd like to press charges against Mr. Thorne. Yesterday he assaulted me." "Mr. Vance," the sheriff said tiredly, stepping forward as well, "I already explained that if you go onto a man's property uninvited and get into a fight, that's trespassing on your part and self-defense on his. Your honor?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "Ava, you threw away your honor the moment you moved in with him. Do you really think this marriage is anything other than a legal fiction to cover up what you've already been doing?" Caleb moved so fast he was a blur, grabbing Daniel by the collar. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "That woman is my wife. If you ever speak about her that way again, a split lip will be the least of your problems." "Put him down, Thorne," the sheriff warned. Caleb released Daniel with a shove. "Stay away from my property. Stay away from my wife." "I just performed a marriage ceremony for these two people," Reverend Michael said, moving to stand beside them. "A legal binding marriage. As of now, they are husband and wife, and they deserve to be treated with respect." "This isn't over," Mrs. Davenport hissed, as her husband led her away. "This marriage won't last, and when it falls apart, don't come crying to this town for help." "I wouldn't dream of it," Ilara said. "This town has made it clear what it thinks of me." "But you know what, Mrs. Davenport? I don't need your help or your approval. I have a husband who loves me and a home that's more real than any of you could possibly understand. So you can keep your judgment and your gossip." "I don't want any part of it." She turned to Caleb, who was watching her with awe in his eyes. "Can we go home now?" "Yeah," he said softly. "Let's go home." They climbed into the wagon and pulled away from the church, leaving the arguments and shocked whispers behind them. They didn't look back. The ride home was one of quiet triumph. "Do you regret it?" Caleb asked quietly, as they left the town behind. Ilara looked at him, at his scarred face and the hands that held the reins with such capable strength. She thought about the desperate woman who'd stood in this town with 17 cents and nowhere to go, and the woman she'd become. "Not for a second," she said. "Do you?" "Not for a second," he echoed, and the smile he gave her was bright enough to rival the sun. They reached the cabin as the afternoon light was starting to fade. Silas helped Ilara down, and they stood for a moment in the yard, the magnitude of what they'd done settling over them. "So," Ilara said, a playful smile touching her lips, "I suppose I should ask, where do I sleep now?" Caleb laughed, that rusty sound she'd come to love, and pulled her close. "Right here," he said, echoing the words from that first night. But this time he kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Right here, with me, always, always," Alara agreed, and let him lead her inside their home. If you enjoyed Alara and Caleb's journey, please show your support by hitting the like button, leaving a comment with your thoughts, and subscribing to the channel. You can find more stories like this one in our playlist right here. Your support truly keeps this channel going and means the world to me. Thanks for watching.